of teaching online, right? I mean, and it has not.
Yeah. But I mean, the questions are always about evaluation, like how to do
Right, guys.
that.
I think we should probably begin.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So let me just click on admit all, and yeah, I think. So let me make the official announcement. So we are very happy to have Rakesh Chaturvedi from IIIT Delhi, who's going to present a paper on the last mile internet. So Rakesh, whenever you're ready.
Yeah. So thanks, Ganesh. So let me start by, I think, what motivated us. Yeah. So of course, I mean, the internet is a ubiquitous presence today in our people's lives every day. I mean, the primary role, of course, is information exchange. That has almost become the primary means. But
Rakesh,
it is, I mean,
I just want to interrupt just a little bit here. Sorry, I didn't mention this. If anyone has questions, you can ask them while the talk is on, but these should be of reasonably short duration, only clarificatory. We have 10 minutes after, so this will go for an hour. So we have 10 minutes after where you can ask maybe longer questions. And if anyone has issues with their audio, you can write your questions in the chat. Okay. So yeah, sorry, Rakesh, go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, I was saying that apart from being this information exchange, playing that role, it's also supporting business, media, it's in leisure, Netflix, Prime, whatnot, and in these times, it's also supporting education. Sorry. Am I audible?
Yes, carry on.
Okay. Yeah. So that's what we see. That's what is visible to us, to a layman. But behind all this um, an, so to say, the internet is described by many people as a network of networks that is supported by a lot of infrastructure. You have root servers, broadband lines, fiber connections, optical fiber connections that bring the internet to your homes. Of course, you have switches and routers to communicate data packets across the network. You also have content delivery networks that are sort of what Google and Amazon, big companies like that maintain, closer to consumers to deliver content quickly. You also have wireless internet supported by cellular towers, and of course, I mean, long distance, very long distance backbone lines that connect these networks. So that is behind the scenes what's going on. So now a little bit of history would be useful. So the internet was not commercial always. I mean, in fact, it started as a government-sponsored project in the United States, and some universities and some U.S. military, etc., were the primary users. But then around late 90s, it started growing into commercial enterprise. And with that came a lot of new questions, technological as well as economic. So earlier, what typically would be what the data packets on the internet would look like were basically email communication and some file transfers, etc. But today it's a very different situation. The data traffic is composed primarily of this heavy duty video streaming and gaming application that consume a lot of bandwidth. And a characteristic of these data flows is that they lose their value if users experience delay in using these services. So delay causes a loss of value on the internet as far as these applications are concerned. And so congestion matters. Okay, so it's costly to everyone. And so since this transition happened, questions about pricing and investment incentives have always been at the fore, out of interest. So of course, I mean, about the internet. So what are we interested? I mean, this is like we're trying to. Of course, when you think about the internet, it's a complicated thing, but can we sort of from this complicated thing construct a model, a toy model that helps us think about some of these issues, of these pricing and investment issues, and so what's the objective of modeling? Of course, to shed some light on what are trade-offs involved in pricing and making investment decisions, but also to throw some light on some policy questions. So regarding the internet, the most most important or talked about public policy question has been what is often called network neutrality. So let me start with so network neutrality often has described in the literature as two sort of aspects to it. Or two, you might say two definitions. One aspect, by the way, this term was coined by this legal scholar Tim Wu in 2003 in a law journal, in a paper in a law journal. And what its network neutrality says is that you cannot discriminate between data packets flowing on the ISP service providers communication network. So regardless.
Discrimination in what sense?
Yeah. So discrimination in, let's say, you cannot allow Facebook content or Amazon content to flow faster than, let's say, some other content providers' content. So you cannot have these. You cannot prioritize someone's content over others. Okay, this is about one kind of discrimination. The other could be that you cannot do differential pricing of these data packets. So you cannot price Amazon's content more than you price someone else's content. Things like that. So as the next bullet says, that these network practices like priority lanes for certain data packets, these are prohibited. Also prohibited is a differential pricing treatment. So this is one aspect, and regarding this aspect, there's a lot of hue and cry over the years, and in the literature also has addressed this aspect. For instance, Choi and Kim, Economites, and Hermelin are papers that deal with this aspect of neutrality, network neutrality. But probably less known, but equally important, is one other aspect of network neutrality, which is sometimes called the zero price regulation. So what is that? So before I describe what is a zero price rule, let me just say a bit about how this data travels. So for instance, when Google uploads content on, let's say, its own service provider in USA, and a user in India like me, sends a request to download that content, that content, the data packet travel from that ISP long distance towards my ISP, right? Which might be Airtel or whatever. So what it says is that for uploading content on its own ISP in US, Google will of course pay for its internet connection, but it won't pay Airtel in India for reaching Airtel's customer base. So in that, I mean, that is really the zero price rule, that the last mile internet service providers, in the little example that I gave, Airtel would be the last mile service provider for me. Okay, so the last mile service providers are prohibited from charging any price to content providers access to Airtel's customer base. Okay, so there are two terms here. Last mile, of course, I've made it clear, but what does non-originating content providers mean? Well, it just means content providers that do not have Airtel connection, that do not upload content on Airtel's network. Okay, so something like Google will upload, let's say, in US. So it's not going to pay. That's what the zero price regulation means. That in this regime, Google will not pay Airtel for access to its customer base. Of course, if there is content in India, a content provider in India who uploads its content on Airtel network, then of course it will pay Airtel. Okay, so that's what it means. So Lee and Wu, the Lee in this one is the same team. Wu, okay, sorry, Wu is the same Tim Wu who wrote the original net neutrality paper. So he, in 2009 paper, he discusses this aspect at some length. So now, what would, of course, one objective of our modeling is to shed light on the desirability of a zero price regulation. Okay, so what, I mean, how are we thinking about it? Well, you want to first build a plausible world, a model in which you want to introduce this zero price regulation, right? So that means you want to build a world, I mean, in which there is no such regulation present. So what would this cause? Well, a regulatory move like that, which does away with the zero price rule, would introduce this possibility of two-sided pricing for ISPs, wherein they would be able to charge both the consumer side and the content provider side. Okay, so that's what. So yeah. Okay.
Rakesh.
So now, yes.
So I have just I need to clarification. So first, this say you gave this example that Google in US they are providing some content and Airtel is downloading it. So is this path can be even longer? So Google to Vodafone and Vodafone to Airtel. Is this possible? That is also possible because you use the term the last mile provider. Okay, in that case, Vodafone is not getting anything in this business. Google is getting some money and Airtel is getting some money, but Vodafone is in between. It is transferring from Google to Airtel, the whatever data, but it is not gaining anything. I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah. So if I'm assuming that Vodafone customer has a customer base in India, and so yeah, I mean, Google won't pay to Vodafone for accessing its customer base.
And I also don't pay to Vodafone. I pay to Airtel. Suppose I am the only one customer, and I pay to Airtel because I am using Airtel Internet. And in the meantime, Vodafone is transferring from Google to Airtel the data, but it is not gaining anything. I mean, is it like that? I'm just asking. I do not know this thing, how this works.
That's, I mean, see this there are some interconnection charges that these guys pay to each other, very nominal, so to say.
So in that case, continue.
Yeah, but this is between Vodafone and Airtel, let's say.
Airtel, okay.
Right,
That was
right. But not between, let's say, Google and Vodafone.
okay.
Yeah.
And one other thing, this network neutrality, is it a law or it is just by the technicalities it is like that?
No, it's a law. Currently,
It's a law. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Rakesh,
So yes.
the second last bullet, can you just quickly tell that again?
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that the way I described it is that of course Airtel charges its own customers. For instance, me, I'm on Airtel, so of course it charges me. It charges consumers. But if there were no zero price rule, then it would be able to charge Google also.
Yes.
Right. Which so that's what it means. That it introduces the prospect of two-sided pricing.
And then the last point is saying that then your work does what in this case?
So that's what I wanted to say, that that one, I mean, let me be very clear. What is the objective of our modeling? Well, one is to throw light on these pricing and investment decision and I think that's some value in itself. But also the other thing is that it helps us evaluate the desirability of this aspect of network neutrality, which is the zero price rule. We wouldn't have anything to say about the priority lanes and differential pricing, etc. No. So that's, I mean, some work exists in that area already. What we will be able to say something is about this regulation. Okay. Is that okay?
Yes, thanks.
Yeah. All right. So, okay, let's begin the modeling part of it. Okay. So yeah, the first bullet is self-explanatory. So you know, we think of consumers as sort of consuming a commodity called content, and a salient central feature of our model is that broadband connection and content are complementary for consumers, right? A consumer cannot access content without broadband connection. It needs to have a connection to access content. So this is consumed as a bundle necessarily. Okay. So complementarity is going to be the central feature of our model. Of course, there is this separation of ownership between providers of internet connection and providers of content. That is obvious enough. We also model the market for content, you know, the content providers as a competitive market. Specifically, I mean, that we model it as an oligopoly, and that has its own externalities. So there are oligopolistic externalities on the content provider side of this market. Also, central to our model is that there are congestion externalities on the consumer side. Okay, so consumers, when they consume content, I mean, whatever they demand individually, there's going to be some aggregate demand, and that aggregate demand is going to cause congestion on the network, and so that feature is present. Okay, so let me depict this pictorially in this. I think that makes it clearer. So these entities in the model are in black, right? I mean, three entities: ISP, consumers, content providers. On one side are congestion externalities, on the consumer side. On the CP, content provider side, are oligopolistic externalities. Okay. And of course, the arrows in the blue are payments. Okay, payment flow of payments. So of course, consumers pay to the ISP. Content. So remember, this is a model. We are building a plausible, a toy model of in which there is no zero price rule yet. Okay, so that means ISP can charge content providers some money. So that's so the label for the sort of lingo, or the label for that is termination fee. I'm going to use that language to contextualize it in this sort of work. Why is it called, let me be brief about it. Why is it called termination? Well, this language is inherited from its usage in telephone networks, where, if network B calls from a network A to network B would be charged by network B. It's like these calls are terminating in network B, and so therefore network B would charge the other networks for these calls. So that's why that's the origin of this language. Okay, there is complementarity, of course, as I already told. So that's really the overall framework of the model.
Rakesh, just
Rakesh?
one clarification. The market on the internet provider is assumed to be monopoly, right?
That's right. That's right. Sorry, I forgot to say that. In this paper, in this manuscript, we are focusing on a monopoly service provider. Yes.
Rakesh, I had a small question.
Yes, Shabu.
So capital P1 is payment to ISP.
Okay, so I'm going to explain this more in the next slide.
Okay, then it's fine.
Right. I mean, the structure of these prices and all, but for now, I just want you to focus on these flows, right? I mean, this is the overall framework in which a lot of things can be done. Okay. So,
Rakesh,
yes.
but for this, in reality, this internet provider side, that is not monopoly, right?
Yeah. Reality is very complicated. Yes. So of course, if you are pointing to a model in which we should model competition between ISPs, yes, we should. Yeah.
Rakesh, I have a question.
Yes, Jyotana. Yeah.
Yeah, so ideally, content providers may also charge something from the internet service provider, right? But
I don't know why should that be?
because they are providing some content, because internet service
Well,
provider
I
is
mean,
just the middleman.
No, but ISP is not interested in its content. I mean, consumers are, right?
I mean, the ISPs are just supposed to provide the infrastructure.
Yeah. By the way, did I forget to mention that there was payment outflow from consumers to content providers? Okay, so there is going to be, so CPs, content providers or CPs are going to charge consumers for access to content. Okay, so there is that flow. Okay,
But it
all right.
It depends on the bargaining power, right? Because between content provider and internet service provider. So if there is, suppose there is one content provider and many service providers, then you are assuming that there is only one internet service provider. But in an ideal world, it may happen, right? I'm just trying to understand. I do not know this area.
Okay, I mean, if maybe I don't have much to say about that. Yeah.
Rakesh, just one last clarification.
Yeah.
So in your model, this graphical model, so consumers are directly paying the content providers because you have a blue line.
Yeah.
But that's not reality. So it's your model. I'm just checking.
Yeah. Look, I mean, yeah. So what I want to emphasize is that this is a beginning toy model. Reality is much more complicated. I mean,
it's not about complication. It's about that this is not happening in reality. So consumers do not pay anything to the content providers. They only pay to the internet provider, and they, I think, divide it in some way. Is it like that?
Don't you watch?
Because when I use
don't you watch Netflix?
No, okay. So these are called something, but I also do Facebook and many other internet, Gmail.
Yeah. So of course there is a lot of free content, but a lot isn't free. Okay. So more realistic model, which is complicated, which would capture reality, would have both free content and paid content. Okay, this you could see this toy model as talking as one of the extremes. Okay, I think that helps us understand something.
And if the content provider is providing something for free, either is because of promotion or sponsored search, right?
No,
Something like that. I mean,
yeah, I
their
mean, it's
revenue.
making money. There is, of course, some business for the content provider, but I was just thinking that for the
That's
most of the internet I use, I do not pay content provider. So I was just
Because
thinking that what
perhaps
is
somebody
going
else
on.
is paying.
No,
Or
yeah,
they are just
of course, they are
promoting.
making money. Otherwise, they won't provide the service, but not by me directly. That's what my point is.
I mean, of course, there is ad-supported content. Ads is how these guys make money, and they provide free content. But that is going to introduce another entity called advertisers and modeling that and so on. I mean, it's a bit of a challenge. So we started with this.
Okay.
That suppose that is the world. Okay.
So question, what fraction of internet traffic is paid and what fraction is unpaid? Like what, I mean.
That's, good question. I should have known this, but I think, I mean, the more and more I see it's the paid content is growing actually. That's what I
Rakesh,
think.
can I help answering?
Yes.
Actually, so I was looking at a recent survey when we were writing this, and most of the content in terms of volume, because of course videos and all are higher in MB and GB or whatever. So most of the content is now video kind of content, music streaming content, and also video gaming content. And if you think in terms of sheer volume, like maybe not in terms of time spent, because you spend a lot of time on Facebook, which is less than actual volume of like MB or whatever. But in terms of volume, a large part of it is actually paid, because the services that are paid are obviously the ones that consume a lot of data.
Thanks. That answers the question.
Okay, so let's move on. So in this talk, I don't know how am I doing on time. Can someone keep that?
You've got about 35 minutes.
Okay. So let's move fast. So we do two models. Our baseline model, what we call baseline, is going to be something like this. Okay, there is a single good called content that is available in continuous quantities. Okay, there is a continuum of heterogeneous consumers, heterogeneous in taste. Okay, and we are going to index this taste parameter by the symbol T. Okay, that can vary on the positive real line. Okay, and there is going to be, we are going to model this heterogeneity by a distribution in this population. Okay, and consumers demand broadband connection, but only as an input to consume content on the internet. Okay, moreover, I mean, as I already said, there's a continuum of consumers, so they are modeled in here as non-strategic entities who make usage decisions given the prices they face for broadband connection and for content. Okay, so so consumers' utility, okay, preferences are going to be described like, first of all, what are the preferences over? Okay, the preferences are over, of course, the volume of content X that they consume. Okay, the delay D, small d, that they experience when consuming this content. Okay, and the payments that they make to the broadband service provider and to the content provider. Okay, so in this baseline model, what we are saying is that small s is the usage price of content, the price that content providers charge for content. Okay, so if a consumer consumes X amount of content, they're going to pay S times X. Okay, so it's a usage price. On this, so what are the consumer prices like? So ISP uses two-part tariffs on the consumer side. Okay, what does that mean? It means that capital P1 is going to be the access price, just for access to broadband connection. It's like a rental, so to say. Okay, and small p1 is going to be the usage price. Okay, so if X is the volume that a consumer consumes, P1 times X is the usage payment that it makes to ISP. Okay, C of D is the cost of congestion when it experiences a delay of D. Okay, I haven't described what is delay and all, but I will shortly. But this thing should be clear. So what are the structural features of this? Well, additive separability over the volume of content and delay, and of course quasi-linear in money. As I said, this P1, P1 is the two-part tariff charged by ISP to consumers. Yeah, blah blah blah. This is I've already described. 1 over T times UX is the monetary value that a consumer of type T derives from consuming content. Okay, and C of D is the monetary cost of experiencing a congestion delay of D. Okay, so good. So
can you explain the first term? Why is the first term of that form 1 over T?
Well, I mean, so the thing is, yeah, it's just I mean, so the thing is that consumer market size is going to be an endogenous variable in the model, and when you model the preferences as 1 over T, you can talk about consumer market size as being some initial segment of the real line. So that's sort of convenient. It also ties in with the earlier literature on two-part tariffs, so we are able to directly do some comparisons with that model. So I think, yeah, that's, I mean, there is no reason that it needs to be 1 by T, but that's how it is.
Rakesh, once again, small question. So it is for any content provider, the utility function doesn't differ over the different contents.
Oh,
is it right?
I'm sorry, what? Over?
So my utility from different contents might be different. Is it capturing, or it's for a given content, your utility function? Like
no,
I might be differently interested in news and in Facebook and so on.
No, I'm not, what I'm, remember I said that there is a single good called content that is available in continuous quantity. So I'm not
so you have
modeling,
just one content. Okay.
Yeah. I'm modeling it as a homogeneous. It's like, you know, it's like you are, think of it as not Facebook content, not Google content, but just data.
No, I understand. If it is one content, then I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're just consuming data.
What is the difference between small P1 and S?
Yeah, small P1 is the usage price that the ISP charges to the consumers, while small s is the usage price that the content providers charge to consumers.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So so let's describe now content providers. There is a suggestion that we follow given by Carl Shapiro, which is that, you know, as purveyors of, as suppliers of information good, CP's cost structure is well modeled by high fixed cost and low marginal costs. Okay, so so you know, you can assume that, you know, someone spends a lot of money in creating content, and now it's some stock of content, but the marginal cost is really nothing. Okay, so and what the content providers do is to derive their revenues from the direct usage price to consumers. We abstract from advertisement revenues that supports much of free content. Okay, the usage price S is endogenously determined by the market structure. Okay, so we are going to so we are modeling the content providers market as a symmetric Cournot oligopoly. Okay, so let Yj be the volume of content that provider J supplies, and let P2 be the linear termination fee that is charged by the ISP to CPs. Okay, then content provider J's profit is a simple expression like this. You know, S minus P2, right? And S minus P2 is the margin per unit of content, per unit of data flow, times what it produces, Yj, minus the fixed cost. Okay, that's and it's a symmetric. Okay. Yeah, so I mean, I was coming to, I already said some of this. So we could argue, spend some time. This is not the right market structure and so on, but there is no easy modeling prescription, given this. So we simply view the content providers as competing suppliers of information packets, okay? And there is a large but finite number of potential CPs who are all identical. I already said we are modeling this market as a symmetric Cournot game of quantity competition in substitute goods. And moreover, for the two-part, by using these two-part tariffs, the market size of of consumer market size is going to be an endogenous thing in the model. So for reasons of symmetry, we augment the Cournot symmetric Cournot game on the content provider side with an entry stage where CPs simply decide whether to enter or not. Okay, so that the market size on the content provider side also becomes endogenous. So the model is symmetric in that sense. All right, market. So this is also okay. So one of the postulate of the Cournot model is that the price of content adjusts to clear the content market. Okay. So what is the market to which we apply the market clearing condition? Well, that is of data flows. Okay. So it's useful to think of demand flows coming from consumers and supplies flows coming from providers. And so the market clearing condition in flows is given by this equation that you see. So on the left-hand side is the aggregate demand, X, capital X, which is a function, of course, of P1, S, and T. What is T? T is the marginal consumer who connects to the ISP. Okay, the very last consumer who connects to the ISP. So that's defined as the just the aggregate the individual demands. On the right-hand side, capital Y is the supply flows, and that of course depends on the price S and the termination fee P2. Okay, and that's simply a sum overall CPs. All right, so it really looks like this. I mean, the figure is helpful. CP side, there are a finite number of, so to say, and these are YJs are the content flows, and consumers are this is continuum, and these are the individual demands. Okay, so this is it. You can think of it as a water flow in a hydraulic pipe. Okay, so I mean it must balance. Okay, so what about ISP? Okay, we in this paper we stick to a monopoly service provider. Okay, and the cost structure is that so we are assuming that F naught K is the fixed cost of installed capacity K, and small f1 is the constant marginal cost of aggregate usage. Okay, so there is a fixed cost that depends on how much capacity you install, and there is a constant marginal cost of usage. Okay, so ISP's profit is given by this expression where, so remember capital P1 was the access price. Okay, so every consumer pays this access price. The mass of consumers who pay this access price is given by F of T. So that's how much it earns. P1 times X. X is the aggregate demand flow, and that's its revenues from there, from the consumer side. From the content provider side, P2 times Y is its revenue. Okay, minus the costs. All right, very good. So what does yeah? So remember we've never talked about delay. Okay, so what does the ISP do? Yeah. So how should we think of capacity of this ISP? Well, it's the maximum throughput, so to say. Throughput is a technical speak, but it's the maximum rate of data transfer on the service provider's communication channels. So the more consumers use its channels, the more is the utilization rate. and it seems intuitive that the delay should be directly proportional to how much this capacity is utilized. Okay, so we simply follow something that is existing, paper by McKee, Mason, and Varian, in which they define the utilization rate as a simple ratio of usage, total usage, over capacity. Okay, that's the utilization rate, and then sets the congestion delay as exactly equal to this utilization rate. Of course, these are simplifications. In general, congestion delay is maybe proportional to utilization rate, maybe not exactly equal, but that's the simple first step.
So capital X is the total number of packets, transferred over a given duration, right?
Yeah, but this is a static model anyway. Yeah, this is a one-shot model. Okay, so now the supply side is the strategy. Should timeline of decisions in the model? Well, first, ISP makes its investment and pricing decisions. Next, content providers make their entry decisions. Whoever enters, they make their supply decisions, and then consumers. Not then. I should be careful. Consumers are non-strategic, but anyway, consumers make their usage decisions. Okay. So our building blocks of our model. Well, they are classic economic models themselves. I already mentioned the supply subgame between CPs is modeled as a Cournot supply game that is played in the output market. Now, if you see this entire game at once, it's a sequential twist on the well-known pricing game of Cournot for complementary goods. What is taught in classes is the quantity competition model, but this probably you would see in the IO classes that there is a Cournot pricing game for complementary goods as well, and that is a simultaneous move game. But the entire game is some twist on that. Why? Because we set up ISP as a price leader who chooses these prices on consumer side, on CP side. Remember, broadband connection and content is complementary. So if you were to set it up as directly as a Cournot game for complementary goods, then ISP would select prices on whatever price it has, and then CPs would simultaneously select their prices. But what we do in our model is that CPs follow up, but then they don't choose prices directly, but prices are sort of implicit. What they choose is quantities explicitly in a Cournot game. Of course, that is going to result in some price. And so the ISP has cognizance of that this is the structure of the model.
Is that to simplify the analysis of the equilibrium? This making it into sequential rather than.
I think the sequential bit is a bit. If you think about it, it's more natural to what I would say. When you think about how these things are, you always think about the broadband connection as being some sort of primitive or prior to content providers may come and go later and so on. And so and natural is what I would say. So it's useful to begin with a welfare analysis, although I could directly jump into equilibrium analysis, but this is a pure welfare analysis. So if we assume so this is really elementary economics. So assume utilitarian planner, assume that he can't control entry of CPs, but he knows the distribution of tastes among the population. His problem is to maximize this Marshallian surplus. What is it's the gross consumer surplus minus the congestion costs to society minus the service costs to itself and the fixed cost to itself. Of course, subject to aggregate demand being this. So I think in the interests of time, I'm going to skip some of these things and show you the more interesting things. Okay, so when we study this, what would a utilitarian planner how would it choose a pattern of usage for consumers? Well, the simple first order condition would look like this. Okay, so the if, if you interpret this first order condition, you may do well to interpret the first term on the right hand side as the marginal social cost of congestion. Okay, and the second term, of course, is the service charge as we defined. And on the left hand side is, of course, the marginal benefit of usage to type T consumer. Okay, so that's the first. I mean, to select a usage pattern that satisfies this equation. Now, so now it's helpful, conceptually speaking, to think of the right hand side of this thing as a Pigouvian tax. I mean, this is exactly what. If you ask that, how can a planner implement this welfare optimal pattern of usage? Well, if it's set a Pigouvian tax that is exactly equal to the right hand side, which is which can be usefully thought of as a congestion charge plus a service charge, then setting this Pigouvian tax would force the consumers to internalize the congestion externalities. Okay, so that's what I mean. This conceptual device of Pigouvian tax is going to be interesting. So why does it make sense to think of this as a congestion charge? When you think about what would a planner choose, how would it choose capacity? It would choose capacity. The first order condition would look something like this, which just says that increasing capacity will increase welfare if and only if revenues from congestion charge make up for the cost of capacity provision. So it is in this sense that this interpretation of congestion charge makes sense, that it sends the right economic signal to the planner to expand capacity. Okay, that's as much about welfare analysis. So if I study equilibrium in the model I just described.
Rakesh, Praval has a question.
Yes, Praval.
So he's writing to me on chat because his audio is not working. So he's asking, does the formulation of first best assume that the planner knows the identity of all consumers?
That the planner knows the identity. Well, I mean, if really, I mean, it's like, what would that? If you are a consumer of type T, then what is the usage that the planner would prescribe to you? That's what it says. I mean, that's how we think of this.
The distribution is known. The distribution of types is known to the planner, right?
Yeah. I mean, anyway, I think I'm. So yeah, I mean, I understand Praval's question. For this purposes, let's just assume that if it were to know that I am a consumer of type T, what is the usage pattern it would set for me? Okay, that's otherwise he would have to offer some sort of a schedule or something, right? But anyway, this pure welfare analysis is anyway a fictitious thing. I mean, we just want to we know it's a fictitious thing. It's just a theoretical benchmark, so to speak. But let's. I think. Yeah. Can I move on?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So when we come to this equilibrium analysis, this is our first theorem. So in this model, the monopolist ISP, the way it turns out, the monopolist ISP's equilibrium profits are a function only of the usage price level on the network. Okay, what do I mean by usage price level? It's the sum of the marginal prices on both sides. Okay, so if you fix a usage price level P, then the profits are invariant to the usage price structure. It doesn't matter whether P1 is equal to P and P2 is 0, or P2 is equal to P and P1 is 0. So that's some surprise that the decomposition for a given usage price level, the decomposition does not matter. Okay, and so what is this usage price level determined by in equilibrium? Well, it obeys a learner style formula in which, now this is interesting, that in which the markup is over the Pigouvian tax, okay, and not just on its private marginal cost F1. Usually when we study learner's formula in the context of monopoly pricing, what we have on the left hand side is the learner index, in which the markup is over your private marginal cost, right? But here it is over the Pigouvian tax E, which remember what was E? E was the congestion charge plus the private marginal costs. Okay, so that's what the markup is over. Of course, the right hand side is the usual IO, and who may have studied two-part tariffs would like to contrast it with the pricing formula that appears in their two-part tariff literature. So really, this is the difference. That first of all, it's the total usage price level P. That's the model. That's by nature of the model. But the markup is over the Pigouvian tax, not over private marginal cost. Of course, eta YP is the elasticity of the content flows with respect to the total usage price, and this term in the parenthesis is a term that comes due to heterogeneity, taste heterogeneity among consumers. Okay, so that's what the pricing formula is. The choice of an access price in this model it turns out to be equivalent to the choice of a marginal consumer T that delimits the consumer market size. And I mean, this is nothing new. This is also true in the classic literature on two-part tariffs. So I don't want to spend time over this one. Okay. So now, as a consequence of this, we have the following corollary, which is also immediate, is that for any equilibrium in which the service provider earns a certain level of profit, that is with a usage price P, that features a positive termination fee, P2 is positive. For any such equilibrium, there exists another equilibrium in which it earns the same level of profits with the same usage price level, but with a zero termination fee. Okay, so in other words, zero price rule is going to be neutral in this model. Okay, it's not going to affect the content flows at all. What it's just going to affect is that the consumer usage price is going to just be higher. Okay, so that's an interesting corollary that it's really a zero price rule does nothing in this model.
Do you think the quasi-linear nature of the money of the consumer's utility is in part responsible for some of
well, sure, but not only the quasi linearity, but also the affine, the two-part, the structure of the two-part tariffs, which is really affine pricing. That is also linear. That is also linear. Yeah. So I mean, your suspicion is right. And so yeah. Anyway, I just throw that we also do a equilibrium welfare analysis, which is fine. I mean, no one would bat an eyelid by looking at this. So I just How am I doing on time?
Yes, you've got about 10 minutes, and then
10 minutes.
10,
Okay.
and then 10 further. 15 minutes.
Sure. So I would, in the interest of time, skip over some of these things and first show you the results, so to say. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, this slide may be useful to sort of keep track of things that when you write down the monopolist, what is the monopolist decision problem? Well, he's interested in. I mean, that's what his profits are, right? And that's what he's choosing. But what are the constraints? Well, the constraints are that that he knows that the market is going to clear in the whatever he does, the market is going to clear. Of course, he has to respect the participation constraints for all consumers who connect. Okay, and of course, he has to, that the aggregate demand specification, aggregate supply specification. What he has to also ensure is that he shouldn't set a price P2 so high that there's really no content provider willing to supply content, right? So that's like that he has to ensure that that content providers are viable. Okay, that means that he should ensure that that the margin for them is positive. Okay, S minus P2 is a positive thing. That's what he should ensure. Okay, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to sort of some principal difference in the optimal two-part tariff literature, and these differences are driven by the presence of two sides in our model and the presence of congestion externalities. Okay, so what happens is that while increasing the aggregate content flow increases the consumer surplus, it also increases the congestion costs, right? Thereby reducing the ability to extract that surplus from consumers, right? Because ISP has to respect the participation constraint. And of course, there's, as I said, he has to ensure a positive markup for CPs for the market to be viable. So these are sort of principal differences which are not there in the optimal two-part tariff literature. Okay, so a comment that I think Siddharth made is also what I mean. We suspected that it might be due to this affine nature of two-part tariffs. So that prompts us to extend our model to nonlinear pricing, in which ISP charges a nonlinear price to the consumers. Okay, a price schedule, so to say, and the model is laid out in this slide. So this model differs with the model I exposited earlier only with respect to this feature. Okay, that the ISP charges a nonlinear price to consumers. The rest aspects are exactly the same. So you may have a look. Yeah, ISP's profits are now going to look like this, right? There's the type contingent price schedule. So it's going to be an integral over the taste parameter, okay, until the last marginal consumer. And of course, yeah, market clearing. Nothing changes at all about anything else. So in particular, nothing changes on the CP side. Okay, what does this give us? Okay, of course, the analysis of nonlinear pricing is as old as this. So I mean, by now, standard expositions of these things exist. What I want to say is that in our model, nonlinear pricing is just one aspect. Okay, it appears in the context of a larger model in which some other things are going on. So it's intertwined with complementarity and endogeneity of consumer market size. Okay, so while we carry out this standard analysis in the paper, that's not how we see as our anything related to our contribution. So I'm going to skip that thing altogether. I'm just going to point that the salient feature of that is that the pricing rule is completely pegged on to the allocation rule, right? That's what we learn in introductory mechanism design. So by if you do sort of this analysis in this model, then you can do the sort of inverse for content. It turns out to be sort of consistent with how we carried out the stuff in the two-part tariff model. That's, I mean, this is just to give some context that we're not making a mistake. Okay, the supply side, there is no change. But now remember, in this model, there is nonlinear pricing, right? And so there is really no easy definition of a usage price level on network. Here we defined it as a sum of marginal prices on both sides. But now there is really no easy definition. So statements that made sense in the two-part tariff model, statements like markup depends only on the usage price level, but invariant to its structure. I don't think there are easy counterparts here. Nevertheless, the problem, ISP's problem, looks like this. Helpful to see that it looks like this. The constraints now are that this pricing schedule together with the allocation rule, it has to be incentive compatible and IR. Of course, the rest of the constraints are the same. And so one step further, I said that the pricing rule P1 is pegged onto the allocation rule. So you can reduce ISP's problem to a choice of K, capacity, T, the market size, consumer market size, allocation rule for consumers, and the termination fee. And again, it looks like this. Now about the results. So before we state our results, it's helpful to state two assumptions that are there. Okay, these are some assumptions. So assumption one is that the FT was the density of consumer tastes in the population. Okay, so assumption is that as T tends to 0, there's the derivative of this density is 0. Okay, so why do we need this assumption? Well, under assumption 1, the information tends to 0 for a consumer whose type tends to 0 arbitrarily closely. Okay, so this is the familiar, in screening models, nonlinear pricing models, there is a familiar, no distortion at the top condition, right? Where top just means a highest marginal value consumer. So it is to maintain this this feature in our model that we need this. Okay, and assumption 1 is satisfied by, of course, by your uniform, but also is this extremely flexible gamma family of distributions. And this is really very mild assumption. One way to view this is that it places constraints on the distributions through which we should model taste heterogeneity if we want to preserve the no distortion at the top feature, which is a standard feature of screening models. So next assumption is the analog of the regularity assumption in simple screening models. So here, we are saying that this thing 1 minus distribution FT over T is positive and non-increasing in T over some initial segment of the real line. Okay, it's also satisfied by the uniform distribution as long as the right end is bigger than 1. It is also satisfied by many members of the gamma family of distributions, but the right end now depends on the value of these two parameters. That's fine. That's fine. It is really the analog of regularity conditions, right? Remember in simple screening models, that regularity condition is a hazard rate condition, right? So I think that is due to the particular way that this thing appears in our model. that's why these assumptions look a bit different from there. Otherwise, there's really no difference. Okay, for results. In this case, the equilibrium nonlinear price schedule for consumers is completely determined, but up to the congestion cost. Okay, it's completely determined by the equilibrium usage allocation rule. And under these two assumptions, the allocation rule must obey this equation that you see. Okay, looks like how should we interpret this? Well, the economic content is extremely simple. So remember, in classic screening models, what's the condition? What does this condition look like? It says that the virtual marginal benefit of type T consumer must equal the monopolist's marginal costs. Okay? That's how the allocation to T is decided. Okay. Here, the way it appears is that the virtual marginal benefit. Remember, this thing is the virtual marginal benefit of type T consumers minus the content provider's markup should be equal to service provider's marginal costs. Okay. Remember, this term is markup. So that's how, in simple English, this is what it looks like. Okay. So, and this is fairly intuitive, the monopolist ISP is forced to cede some economic pie, not only to consumers as informational rent, which is the feature present in screening models also, but also to content providers as markup, and why is that happening? Well, because of the complementarity relation that exists between the two. Okay, so that's easy enough to interpret. Even more interesting is the pricing formula for termination fee. Okay, so again, it's going to be determined by a learner style formula, but in which the markup is over a complicated thing. What is that complicated thing? It is the Pigouvian tax plus the content price that is scaled down by a factor that is related to the demand elasticity. That looks really complicated. But what is why should that be so? If you think so, remember, if you reason through the model, what are the trade-offs that a monopolist faces while setting P2? Well, P2. What is P2? Well, P2 appears as a marginal cost for content providers, right? So if ISP tinkers with P2, it's directly tinkering with the marginal cost of CPs, and so therefore it will affect the content supply, and so the content flow on the network, and that is going to cause congestion. I mean, that is going to result in some congestion, right? So the Pigouvian tax, of course, takes care of that. Remember, Pigouvian tax had the congestion charge, so to say. Okay, but what else? Well, by affecting this supply of content, it is also going to affect the price S that prevails in the content market, right? Okay, and if the content price changes, that is going to affect the demand indirectly, right? That is going to affect the consumer demand because consumers pay S to CPs, right? So that and a monopolist ISP is cognizant of that tinkering with P2 while directly interferes with supply of content flows, it indirectly affects demand flows as well by affecting the content price, and the magnitude by which it does should be intuitively related to this, right? Demand elasticity. So that's why these terms appear. Okay.
And it's impacting the revenue of the ISP from the consumers.
I'm sorry, say that again.
That would impact the revenue of the ISP coming from the consumers.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. Exactly. Right. So I mean, that's why ISP should be cognizant of all these things, and so that's why the pricing formula is a bit complicated, right? So this can be, I don't know why I stated this equivalent statement, but those of you familiar with the two-sided market paper, Roche and Tirole, would recognize recognize that that terms like this appear in those papers as well. So something called semi-elasticities, etc. But let me not go there. Okay. Okay. So yeah. So what is the difference with respect to the two-part tariff model? Well, it is only the price on the provider side, that is the termination fee, that must obey a learner's formula. Remember, in the two-part tariff model, it was the entire usage price level that obeyed the learner formula. Here, not so. It's only the termination fee that must obey this. Okay. Also, heterogeneity in consumer taste plays no role in this learner's formula, whereas it did in two-part tariff model, right? Here, demand elasticity plays a role. And so remember, if you look at this, a moment's thought would reveal that inelastic content demand leads to a higher termination fee than would an elastic content demand. Okay. Just if you stare at it a bit, I think it will be clear that the more inelastic demand is, the higher, because then intuitively the ISP doesn't have to think too much that, even though P2 interferes with S, it's not going to affect too much on demand flows, right? So ISP can have a free run, so to say, but not so when it is elastic. Okay. So what are the trade-offs involved? I mean, some of it I avoided. There is temptation to make more money. That's fine, but it has to take care, because it's going to reduce content flows, as I said, both directly on the supply side and indirectly on for service provider, because of the reasons. Okay.
So Rakesh,
we also do.
We are sort of coming close to finishing. Maybe about 5 minutes more.
Okay, sure. I'm almost done. Okay. So a slide on equilibrium welfare analysis. Well, okay. If you read part 2 and part 3 of this theorem, it says consumer market size in equilibrium is too small relative to social optimum. Similarly, equilibrium usage allocation is too less relative to social optimum for any given type. I think no economist would bat an eyelid by looking at this, right? Because, I mean, monopoly, what do you expect? But the most surprising thing is that the equilibrium termination fee is socially optimal. Okay, so P2, whatever, I mean, there is no divergence between a monopolist's incentive to set a P2 and how a social planner would set it. Okay, so that's the surprising part. This is our last theorem. We go on to sort of say that, when would a zero price rule, what can we say about that? So it really, derives from this part, that if you don't do any regulation, equilibrium termination fee is socially optimal. Okay, but there may be cases when that equilibrium termination fee should be zero, and it is then that a zero price rule would be socially optimal. So what are those circumstances? Well, that is what is stated in this theorems. So a sufficient condition for positive termination fee to be socially suboptimal is when the demand elasticity is, I mean, when the demand for content is sufficiently inelastic. Okay. That's when a zero price rule would sort of make some sense. Okay, and when would the zero price rule be suboptimal? Well, if it is sufficiently elastic. So that's, I think intuitively this is this theorem, I mean, is just an extension, so to say, of how how we understand part 4 of this theorem. But yeah, that's what it is. Okay, I'm now going to make some concluding remarks. I think, you may, so let me comment about the overall modeling framework. But I think it's hard to argue that, statements about network neutrality and so on, and comments about pricing on the internet, etc., should be made in a model without the features that we have. So I think in this sense, the overall modeling framework in which complementarity exists, congestion externalities are present, and of course there is a oligopolistic externality. I think these are seem like fundamental to every modeling attempt, but the framework is flexible enough to facilitate if someone wants to study extensions, and of course, as people have already mentioned, how would competition in broadband connection provision would impact the results. So, of course, we took the simplest possible modeling of content market as a homogeneous product, symmetric oligopoly, but you could think of better alternatives. In this model, we modeled congestion as affecting congestion as a lump sum tax on utility. Remember, but you could take issues with that, and you could say that we should model congestion as affecting the marginal value of content, and study its implications. And of course, as some people mentioned, what about if we have advertising supported content, and moreover subscription based pricing of content? In this model we have directly volume based pricing, but what if you had subscription based pricing and so on? So a lot of things are which seem to be closer to reality are not there, but it's a toy model. So okay, I think this is all I had to say. The proofs, etc., are no harder than elementary economics. So I think at the end of it, it feels like this is like the master's thesis that we never wrote, but never late to do that. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, so thanks, Rakesh. We are out of time, so we can't take questions right now. You can of course email. I'm sure the authors will be happy to respond.